Welcome to Walking Through the Policy Platform with BikeWalkKC. I'm going to introduce Michael Kelly, our Policy and Advocacy Director, and I'm gonna let him take the stage.
All right. Thank you very much, Liz, and thank you so much to everyone who was able to join us tonight to walk with us through the policy platform. I'm going to share my screen here so we can get going. And really quick, can I get a thumbs up that everyone can see this? Fantastic. Okay, so let's get this show onto the sidewalk. So again, my name is Michael Kelly. I am the Policy and Advocacy Director for BikeWalkKC. I use he, him pronouns. And we are here tonight to walk through the 2022 policy platform for BikeWalkKC, a look at our policy and advocacy priorities. So really quick, I wanted to give a very brief outline of what all we'll be talking about tonight. And I broke this down by region. So we'll start with Kansas City, Missouri, and then we'll spread out a little bit further to look at KCK, look at some of our regional and suburban areas, look at some of the statewide issues we'll be working on, and then finish up by looking at federal and national issues. Again, please feel free to drop in your questions and we will get to them at the end. So really quickly, before we get into the discussion of the policy platform, I did want to take a moment to give an overview of BikeWalkKC as an organization. So the mission of BikeWalkKC is to redefine our streets as places for people to build a culture of active living. We work to achieve this through 5 primary areas of focus. Advocacy. We advocate for a better built environment for people who want or need to walk, cycle, or roll. That means speaking up for the policies, plans, and projects which make those forms easier and more reliable throughout the metro and beyond. Education. BikeWalkKC has one of the largest education programs of its kind in the country, and we work to teach children and adults how to ride and walk safely, maintain their bikes, and more. During the pandemic, we have shifted many of our operations to virtual settings, but we are beginning to offer outdoor, physically distanced activities as well. Community planning. We also have a community planner on staff who works to provide technical assistance to municipalities and other stakeholders working on planning and projects that will bring those important changes to the built environment. That includes work on traffic calming demonstration projects, as well as citywide planning documents for active transportation. Additionally, BikeWalkKC relies on data collection to tell a story, to provide support for our planning and advocacy efforts, best encapsulated within our community dashboard. Where reliable data is missing, we are able to partner with experts and organizations to research these issues to improve understanding of important topics. And finally, we run the local bike share program. So we have rolled out electric assist bikes to give riders a boost, and we are working to extend our offerings into other parts of the region in the near future. Our most recent one was in Ottawa. All of our bikes are now dockless, meaning that you don't need to return them to a kiosk to end a ride, but you do need to park it out of the right-of-way so it doesn't block the sidewalk. So with regards to the policy platform, there were really 3 guiding themes which informed the development of the priorities for this year. First was collaboration. A common refrain among BikeWalkKC staff is that advocacy is a team sport, and that has been true for all of our advocacy endeavors. While we want to improve our collaborative efforts with organizations from as many sectors as possible, we will likely spend much of 2022 focused on strengthening partnerships with organizations in the housing, neighborhood, and sustainability sectors. Engagement. Engaging with members of the public has been somewhat hampered by the pandemic, which has made it harder to keep folks informed about what is going on and where to focus their energy on active transportation endeavors. So we will work to find new ways to reach our members and broader swaths of the general public as our community continues to work to emerge from the coronavirus pandemic. Data collection and analysis. So data has always been an influence of our work, and we can always use more of it. especially as we work to broaden other parts of the organization's work and other program areas. Being able to collect and analyze data from various sources can make it easier to make the case for the policies, the plans, and the projects which will improve multimodal transportation across the region. So to assist with all of these themes, BikeWalkKC is happy to announce that we are hiring a community organizer. The target start date is March 1st, and we are accepting applications now and hope to have someone identified by that date. The new position is made possible through a new grant we have received from the Environmental Protection Agency. While the overall goal will be to help inform and engage with more residents and community stakeholders than we have been able to in the past, there is a more specific project to start. Working with UMKC researchers, the organizer will work to gather data and input from stakeholders who ride the bus as part of an evaluation of the zero fare transit policy. The hope is to identify additional barriers to greater use, which we can then advocate to address through policy. So please share this. We really do want to cast a wide net with this. So please help us spread the word. So with all that being said, let's jump into the policy platform, and we're going to start with KCMO, where we're working on policy work and planning opportunities, both new and old. So first, we want to talk about improving walkability. So BikeWalkKC has worked with partners in recent years to advocate for policies and actions meant to improve the pedestrian experience. This includes, but is not limited to, the GO bond funds for sidewalk repairs, removing the burden of repair from property owners for sidewalks, expanding the use of bike lanes to specifically allow for people who walk, run, and use wheelchairs, and successfully advocating for the repeal of jaywalking. Beyond these policy wins, there have also been elements of walkability embedded in plans and other documents elsewhere. This includes the KC Spirit Playbook, Vision Zero, and the Midtown Complete Streets Plan. While these elements have moved at different speeds, they still represent important steps, no pun intended, towards improving pedestrian safety and movement in Kansas City. But an important challenge remains in that there really isn't a unifying policy or document. Yes, Liz.
Sorry to interrupt, Michael. We had a question in the chat. Is anybody else having trouble hearing Michael? Okay, it looks like most people are hearing just fine. If you are having trouble hearing him, you might try adjusting the sound where you are on your own device. And also you can go down to the bottom of your screen and there's an option to enable the live transcript. And that might give you, it allows you to have the closed captions on. So if you're having trouble hearing, try that and see if that helps. Okay, I'm going to go back to letting you talk, Michael. Sorry.
Okay, sorry about that, and I hope we're able to get that audio issue resolved for you. Yeah, please let me know if that happens again. Anyway, an important challenge remains in that there really isn't a unifying policy or document for all these parts to ensure that they're all working together. That can lead to missed opportunities for funding or prioritization, projects which may run up against other policies, and a built environment which ultimately feels extremely inadequate or non-existent. Liz, do you still have something? Okay. So all of this is to say, BikeWalkKC wants to figure out how we can address this challenge of improving walkability. Doing so will be our top policy priority for KCMO in 2022. So, all right, sorry. Now, there we go. Okay. So next is the Vision Zero action plan. For those of you who may not know, Vision Zero is a concept which argues that traffic violence, so crashes, injuries, and fatalities, are a public health crisis, and we have to work to make systemic changes to create a street network which is safer for everyone, especially our most vulnerable road users. So a plan is currently being developed by the task force. When the city council adopted a resolution endorsing Vision Zero in May of 2020, the legislation called for a task force to develop an action plan to guide the city's efforts. The plan is currently being developed by a task force. The task force has been working on developing the plan since December of 2020. A number of subcommittees have been working to develop key portions of the plan related to such elements as engineering and evaluation. And the aim is to bring these pieces together in an eventual document, which we're hoping to see complete by late summer or early fall of this year. The plan will still need to be approved by the full council when it is released, and so BikeWalkKC will be working with our partners to push for the action plan's adoption. Another big undertaking from the city, which we're keeping a close eye on, is the KC Spirit Playbook. So the KC Spirit Playbook is the city's version of what's known as a comprehensive plan. A comprehensive plan is exactly what it sounds like. A wide-ranging plan which is meant to inform and guide just about every aspect of a city's growth and development for an extended period of time. The last comprehensive plan, Focus, was completed in 2003, so we're definitely in need of an update. The plan has a number of elements devoted to active living and the built environment, including streetscapes, mobility, and infrastructure. The finalized plan will likely include broad goals the city should strive to achieve, as well as specific recommendations for how to get to that point. BikeWalkKC's goal in being involved with this process is really twofold. First, work to make sure we can inform our members and the broader public of the ways they can weigh in on the development of the plan, specifically with regards to active transportation. And two, work to ensure that the City Council keeps these goals and recommendations in the final version of the plan, which they'll need to formally approve. Additionally, we'll be taking similar steps on another key document being developed by city staff at the moment, the update to the city's Climate Protection and Resiliency Plan. So an important element echoed at the federal, regional, and local level in this plan is that transportation is one of the largest sources of greenhouse gas emissions. According to a preliminary draft of the plan, which has been shared with the Climate Protection Steering Committee, gasoline-fueled vehicles alone constitute 26% of the city's emissions. So working to lower transportation emissions will require a significant shift to more multimodal options. No one form of this type of transportation, walking, biking, or transit, can help to achieve it alone. But if the modes are developed in tandem, no pun intended, and work together, it can make for a real impact. This matters for the vast majority of trips, which are between half a mile and 3 miles. Multimodal transportation alone can't remove all car trips, and that isn't the aim. But documents like this and subsequent policies and projects can make it easier to create the apparatus, which makes that choice easier for more people to make. BikeWalkKC wants to work with our partners in the sustainability sector in particular to make this clear as the plan is finalized and hopefully approved by the full council. Finally, with KCMO, we want to take a closer look at trail funding. So the city of Kansas City in 2018 conducted a study to better understand how it was currently funding parts of its trail system and what that should mean for future developments. The significance of this was understanding that there are a multitude of different sources which have been employed rather than one dedicated funding source. And while the study doesn't explicitly identify any one source, it identified opportunities related to impact fees as a key aspect to consider for funding future projects. Impact fees can be imposed by a city on a broad category of property owners during the development process. These fees are generally collected during permitting processes to subsidize new public infrastructure needed by the development. Unfortunately, like too many plans in Kansas City, the plan was adopted and immediately put on the shelf. BikeWalkKC wants to try to find ways to get the plan off the shelf so the city can find additional funding opportunities for trail development. Especially with new funding coming from the state and federal government, this is an ideal time to figure out how to access more funds to develop the city's trail network for active transportation. So, With that being said, we're going to shift gears and look at KCK, where most of our work will be around continuing our implementation of complete streets. So the main work in KCK will center on implementing this important policy. So complete streets for the audience is the notion that regardless of your preferred mode of transportation, you deserve to get from one place to another as easily and reliably and as safely as anyone else. Complete Streets policies, in turn, work to make that a reality for a community's transportation network over time. KCK updated their Complete Streets resolution to a full-blown ordinance in November of 2020. So one of the main thrusts of this ordinance was that the city would work to develop an annual report to track aspects of the implementation of Complete Streets. BikeWalkKC has been working with Healthy Communities Wyandotte members to develop the contours of this plan, along with some assistance from UG staff and Mark. The plan will likely be limited in these first few years, but as more projects are developed, there will be more opportunities for evaluation. The implementation of Complete Streets will also align with the GoDOT Strategic Mobility Plan that is being developed. The plan is a countywide document meant to identify strategies for how the UG can create greater mobility options for people throughout the area. In addition to Complete Streets, BikeWalkKC will work to keep members and the public informed on developments of this plan as they become available. And all of this is done with the idea that individual projects will eventually be identified and advanced. One of the places where we're getting inquiries and interest is along Rainbow Road. Stakeholders in both KCK and communities in Northeast Johnson County have expressed an interest in trying to get something done. And BikeWalkKC wants to help coordinate efforts to improve multimodal options along the corridor. So we want to take a step back now and look at regional opportunities, which will cover a whole host of things in addition to Complete Streets. So when we speak of regional opportunities, we're speaking about instances where there are clear opportunities for multiple jurisdictions to collaborate on a potential project or policy, as well as general expectations for advocacy opportunities to arise. So first, we often get questions and requests for assistance on advocacy that we are limited in addressing because of our own capacity. To address this, we want to help our members and others learn more about active transportation advocacy to be able to do more of the work in their own communities. To that end, we'll be doing a number of Advocacy 101 trainings throughout the year. Additionally, the Kansas City region will need to decide how to spend infrastructure funds for 2024 and 2025, as well as figure out how to use increased funding from the new infrastructure bill. We will advocate for greater investments in projects which support regional goals of equity, climate protection, health, and mobility, something more than simply building and expanding highways. Close the Gap campaign. So in 2021, BikeWalkKC organized a campaign to urge KCMO to find a way to connect the Gillum Complete Streets project with the Brush Creek and Trolley Track trails. In 2022, we want to identify other gaps in key active transportation infrastructure where we can help stakeholders advocate to connect. And finally, we have continued to receive inquiries from partners and the public about how to effectively organize scooters so they don't block sidewalks and become a safety or accessibility hazard. We want to explore this issue further and consider what other cities are doing to address this challenge. In addition to regional elements, we'll also continue our work with suburban communities. Our primary focus in many of these places will be to get more Complete Streets policies adopted or updated. So we have successfully advocated for more communities to develop or update Complete Streets policies in the last couple of years with success on both sides of the state line. Some of the communities to achieve this have been Westwood, Kansas, as well as Joplin, Missouri. The push for Complete Streets also comes at an opportune time, given the passage of the infrastructure bill. The legislation calls for more communities to pass Complete Streets policies and standards, which do more to ensure walking, biking, accessibility, and transit are more explicitly prioritized. In other words, communities will likely need to create or update their policies to give them better chances to get more funding. So, With the regional aspects taken care of, we can now look at some of the statewide goals and policy efforts we'll be engaged in both Jefferson City and Topeka. So with Kansas, the major statewide effort we are watching is the update to the statewide active transportation plan. Last completed in the 1990s, the plan is meant to inform how statewide entities like KDOT can work with communities and key stakeholders to improve walking, biking, rolling, and more for people throughout the Sunflower State. The plan hasn't been formally released, but is expected soon. When it is released, BikeWalkKC will work to make sure our partners and communities on the Kansas side of the metro know of its release and of its contents. The plan is important because coupled with new federal regulations and funding opportunities, it could inform new projects. One key area where this could have a major impact is with bridges. New wording in the infrastructure bill has made it clear that states and MPOs need to make a more concerted effort to incorporate bike and pedestrian elements into bridge upgrades and rebuilds. Coupled with the update to the statewide active transportation plan, this could inform ongoing projects such as the 18th Street Bridge in KCK. It is also likely that the update to the statewide plan will identify legislative opportunities for lawmakers in Topeka to consider. In that regard, BikeWalkKC will consult with our partners in other communities such as Wichita, Topeka, and Manhattan to see if we can help to lay the groundwork for such legislation to be introduced in 2023. There are two big efforts BikeWalkKC hopes to build progress on in the Show Me State for 2022 by contrast. The first of these is the development of a statewide active transportation plan. So unlike in Kansas, there is not currently a statewide active transportation plan to update in Missouri. The reason it is important to have such a plan in place is because it helps to ensure there is effective coordination with between state departments and better cooperation with communities on related projects. The absence of a plan creates confusion, missed opportunities, and funds left on the table, among other shortcomings. BikeWalkKC is part of a statewide coalition known as Missourians for Responsible Transportation, which works to provide technical assistance to communities across the state and coordinate with key departments on statewide issues. There is a growing sense of urgency to develop a plan from entities such as the Department of Health and Senior Services, but also from smaller communities which want to find more ways to improve active transportation for health, safety, and economic reasons. Adopting a plan now could really help to strengthen the process of building and improving multimodal infrastructure in Missouri. One big reason for this is that Governor Parson has pledged to allocate nearly $70 million to support efforts to further develop the Katy Trail, a statewide trail system which has been a boon for rural communities as well as parts of St. Louis and Kansas City. Better coordination through a statewide plan can speed up the process of developing and installing new infrastructure, but may also enable the state to pursue more funding for related endeavors. The second big initiative BikeWalkKC is involved in at the state level in Missouri is distracted driving legislation. So Missouri is one of only 2 states in the country without a full ban on texting while driving. I will let folks guess in the comments what the other state is. Missouri did pass legislation a few years ago which bans texting while driving for those under the age of 21, but efforts to make it apply for all drivers have stalled in Jefferson City. So Missourians for Responsible Transportation has been working with a coalition of organizations and individuals across the state to push for more comprehensive legislation to be passed. Some of the other entities include AAA of Missouri, the City of Joplin, and General Motors. In response to the actions of the coalition, 10 different pieces of legislation have been introduced on the topic this session. 2 of those are from members of the Kansas City area delegation. SB 713 filed by Senator Greg Razor and HB 2279 filed by Representative Ashley Bland Manlove. So finally, before we get to questions, we do want to cover our work on federal and national issues. So a big part of our federal advocacy for 2022 will be centered on active transportation funding. First, the infrastructure bill includes major increases in dedicated funding for active transportation compared to previous years. One prominent example of this is the Transportation Alternatives Program, which saw a 60% increase in funding as a result of the legislation's passage. Getting more projects funded through these opportunities helps us to build a stronger case that there's demand for funding these sorts of projects, which has a potential to lead to more funding for walking and biking projects over time. So despite the cold water thrown on it by some Democratic senators who will remain nameless, there is still a chance that Build Back Better could move forward, albeit in smaller, separate parts. The link to active transportation lies largely in increased funding for climate funding and the desire to rapidly lower transportation-related GHG emissions. The big opportunity here would be an e-bike tax credit to help offset the cost of purchasing a new one. The program itself is not perfect, but it would be a major step in the right direction. Finally, the infrastructure bill included a set aside of several $billions, which will be available for multimodal projects as well. Because much of the grants are related to improving aspects of equity, safety, and sustainability, this represents additional opportunities for communities to access increased funding for projects which improve multimodal transportation. Finally, we want to use 2022 as an opportunity to build upon our work with regards to repealing jaywalking and complete streets. So in May of 2021, BikeWalkKC worked with partners and the public to successfully advocate for the repeal of jaywalking, bike inspections, and a significant modification of the dirty wheels section of the municipal code. In doing so, Kansas City became one of the first major cities in the country to take such a step. These efforts have enabled us to partner with the National Safe Routes Partnership to develop a how-to guide to inform similar efforts in other communities like Denver and Atlanta. We hope to release that guide to the public very soon. Finally, through our work with MRT, BikeWalkKC has been providing technical assistance to a number of different communities in recent years. A common request was how to develop good policies, specifically as it related to complete streets. Taking that cue, we worked with the National Complete Streets Coalition to develop a model ordinance. We have been fortunate to successfully deploy this model for a number of communities and hope to build on that more this year. So with all of that, I want to thank you all for letting me ramble for some time, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. I will stop sharing here, but before I go any further, I want to check and see if anyone knows. So someone did say the right answer. I think it was Linda, said it is Montana. Montana is the other state that does not have a comprehensive ban on distracted driving legislation. So.
Linda, I will say, if you will email me at liz.harris@BikeWalkKC, I will send you a prize for getting that right. Just email me your address and I'll get that out to you. Michael, let's take a look at some of the questions that we had that were sent to us already tonight, and we'll start with those. All right, let me get it pulled up here and I'll just ask it for you, all right?
Sure.
And then I'll give folks a little bit more time to ask their questions in the chat. So we've had some folks who are interested in some of the new bicycling infrastructure that they've seen pop up around, and you might answer this, or if Teresa, our director of community planning, is also on tonight. So if you guys want to tag team this, I'll let you have it.
Okay.
If you can explain some of the new stuff that folks have seen and how that's related to Vision Zero, please. Sure.
So one of the things that we started to see, as I'm sure many of you're aware, was the Gillum Cycle Track. So the Gillum Cycle Track is one of the first projects of its kind, and is part of an initial thrust of kind of low-hanging fruit for the city when it relates to Vision Zero. So while the city is still working to develop the action plan, they are also in the process of kind of working on a number of initiatives that were identified earlier on. So this includes 30 miles of protected bike lanes over the next 2 years, intersection improvements at about 6 different locations, and the installation of traffic calming devices at 50 locations that had previously been identified by neighborhoods. I will add really quickly that there was an ordinance that was passed late last year, which allocates about $1.3 million to fund those traffic calming devices to be installed in neighborhoods. So I'm not sure if Teresa had anything more to add on to that. So yeah. Very, very good question.
Thanks, Michael. We had a couple more questions about how people individually. Oh, hold on, Teresa.
Okay, it wouldn't let me talk.
That's my fault.
Well, the only thing that I would throw out here is just a little teaser to stay tuned for our bike infrastructure data update. BikeWalkKC does a great job on the community dashboard of maintaining bike infrastructure projects pretty much all across the MARC member area. So that's well beyond KCMO and KCK. And in about a month, we will have all of the 2021 bike projects updated on there. So just stay tuned. That will go out through email and social media.
Thank you, Teresa. I'm going to add the link to that community dashboard here in the chat. And that has a lot of information on it beyond just bike infrastructure. It also has maps involving our education programs and more. We also had some questions about how folks can directly affect infrastructure or policy in their neighborhoods. So specifically, how do they make sure that infrastructure is being maintained? So once we build it, do we just let it crumble? Or do we keep it up so it's still usable once we build it? And then the other question is, how can you advocate for change specifically in your neighborhood or specifically in your community? Those are probably 2 questions. So I guess start with maintenance, and then we'll move on to the next one.
Sure. So the first thing I'll say is that an increasing recognition by federal legislators and agencies is that maintenance is something that has to be rolled into the funding for projects. So part of the reason that it wasn't happening as much in the past was because we weren't planning for it at any level of government. And so that is slowly starting to change, thankfully, and the infrastructure bill kind of builds on that. The part of the advocacy part there is specifically making it a point to document what maintenance needs to happen, and then sharing that with your elected officials or city staff. I know one of the things that has been effective and requires a little bit more work over time will be using KCMO 311 to kind of clear brush out of protected bike lanes, or to try to get some of the sidewalk smaller issues taken care of. So that's the answer to the first question. With regards to the second question, I actually want to use a story to explain this, because I think it's really, really cool. So we got an email back in about August of 2021 from a man named Matt Roberts from Blue Springs. Matt was hearing rumblings that there was going to be a project kind of started to address some of the traffic issues near an area high school where he lived. But the problem was that there was no inclusion of language or consideration for improving walking or biking in the area. And he thought that was problematic. And so he reached out to us to ask, what can I do to try to fix this? And so we deliberated internally and then told him, check out the city's comprehensive plan. And the reason why we encourage that is because The comprehensive plan had language on things like transportation costs, as well as a specific call out for the city to work to improve multimodal options in the city over the course of that plan. And so using those elements, Matt went to first the City Planning Commission and then to the City Council to advocate for the inclusion of some sort of facility which would make it easier for people to walk and bike in the area. And his advocacy was ultimately effective. He was able to get a new road and sidewalk and bridge installed, which not only created a safer space for people to walk and bike to the school, but also connected it to another school in the area. So as much as possible, if you're able to kind of familiarize yourself with some of the key documents for your city, that can be one of the ways that you can not only become an expert, but become a more effective advocate for those issues in your community.
Thanks, Michael. I did link to Matt's story a little further up. You can see that where it says, Matt R. in Blue Springs advocated to connect two high school campuses with a safer railroad crossing. And so I kind of did my own, I'm sorry if any planners or engineers here are going to judge me for this, but I did my own little like Google Maps tracing, and it looks to me like they cut, it used to be that these students would have to walk 1.5 miles. That's a full mile out of their way to have a safe place to cross that railroad. But now it's less than 0.5 mile between the schools. So that's really exciting. That's cool. We have a question from Kyler. So when the guide to repealing jaywalking is published, do you have plans to promote that to any targeted cities or local groups, or I guess not local groups because we did it here locally, but targeted cities or organizations?
Thank you for the question, Kyler. What we're planning for, at least at the moment, is to have kind of a kind of virtual unveiling of the plan, and we plan to invite folks to participate. I will say that we will probably share the contents of that document with our partners or with our colleagues in places such as Denver and Atlanta, because they really are in the midst of actually working to try to get that done. I actually spoke with someone from the Denver Bicycle Lobby earlier this week who was beginning to do outreach to elected officials to kind of gauge how they might organize around trying to repeal jaywalking in that community. So be on the lookout for that. We will definitely publicize when it is published and when we have that virtual event. So thank you.
Michael, can I add on to that? We really want that how-to guide to become a living, breathing, organic document where other advocates in other communities across the states can go to share experiences. So we don't want it just to be like this two-dimensional report. We very much want it to be spark conversation and serve as a gathering point virtually for advocates who are at various levels of this type of advocacy work.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yes. And thank you for making that point, Amy.
We have a question from Amanda. Any specific thoughts on how BikeWalk's work and policy integrate with affordable housing and policy?
Yes, thank you for that question, Amanda, and welcome. I'll say that there are a number of ways that transportation and affordable housing mix and kind of align. One of the ways that it kind of aligns is with regards to cost. And specifically figuring out, how can we work to lower a overall household cost by not only bringing down the cost of housing, but also the cost of transportation. This also ties in with the broader question of land use. So because of how we build our communities, that can contribute to those increased costs and some of the other challenges that we have seen with both housing and transportation being challenges for the most vulnerable among us to be able to get. One of the things I will definitely add that we want to kind of work to build on, and we've already done this somewhat, is we want to talk more with housing advocates about how they are working on transportation and how we might be able to support them in those endeavors as well. And one other thing I'll add is we've actually published a policy brief on this, and I will share this in the chat.
Thanks, Michael. I'm glad you found that. I was thinking about that. Yeah. Okay. I think that, so one thing I want to know, going back to the maintenance and making local change questions. I know that KCMO has a 311 app that if you have a public works type problem or something like that, you can make a complaint on KCMO's 311. KCK also has a 311 service. Do any other cities in the area use 311? I'm asking this of the whole group. I live in KCMO, so that's what I'm most familiar with. But does anybody else, does your city use an app or other public works type request service? I'll let folks respond in the chat, or if you want to respond verbally, just raise your hand and I'll let you in.
Yeah, so that's a good question. I know that it kind of varies from place to place. So yeah.
So while folks are responding, we have a comment from Linda, a question. Linda says, my son was struck by a truck while using a crosswalk in November, and the driver was not given a citation. Would BikeWalkKC be interested in supporting our group's efforts to change Missouri crosswalk laws?
We would definitely be interested in wanting to know more. We want to make sure that we're yeah. So if it's a statewide thing, then absolutely. I will say if it's a request for some sort of local change, it wouldn't actually, BikeWalkKC might actually be the best organization to handle that. We would actually connect you with our partners with TrailNet, which is the sister organization in St. Louis.
So I think the answer is yes, we are very interested. Reach out to us and
Sorry.
That's all right. Yes, we are very interested. If you will send us an email, Michael's email address is michael.kelly@bikewalkkc.org. We want to learn more about your group and how we can help.
And Linda, I do hope your son is okay.
All right. We are winding down on our questions. I don't want to keep folks awesome. I don't want to keep folks longer than necessary tonight just to get us all the way till 7 o'clock. I really appreciate everybody meeting with us tonight. So I'll give you a few more moments to get your questions in the chat if you have anything else. And in the meantime, Michael, do you have any last minute comments for us?
I will just reiterate that we're really excited about everything that we have going on this year. It's going to be another busy year full of a lot of opportunities to improve walking and biking across the metro. And this will not be the only virtual event we have. Like I said, we will have virtual events for the rollout of our decriminalization guide. We will likely have something for the rollout of the Kansas Statewide Active Transportation Plan, and we will definitely have more advocacy 101 trainings, which we definitely encourage folks to participate in, especially if you want to learn more about how to advocate for active transportation improvements in your community. And as always, if you have questions, please feel free to reach out to us and collaborate with us. Oh, I think, did we get one more question?
Yes, Barbara has a question. Do you have, or are you planning any collaborations with RideKC?
So, BikeWalkKC does collaborate with RideKC. That's actually how we support the bike share program. It is a public-private nonprofit partnership between RideKC and other RideKC, Drop Mobility, and BikeWalkKC. So those are our primary ways that we collaborate, but there might also be opportunities to work together on some individual projects. I know one example that we're keeping an eye on is the 11th to 12th Street Complete Streets project. So transit and working with transit folks is definitely something that we always like to do, and we will continue to do that in 2022.
All right. I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. A couple of ways that you can help us out in the future. If you haven't already, and I know several names tonight, several of you are very familiar to me, and when I send out the newsletters, if you are not already, we invite you to join our advocacy mailing list. Our advocacy mailing list folks are the first to receive information about advocacy and policy trainings, about opportunities to get involved with planning projects. So that means, I know that we've got, there's a project in Olathe where the Olathe is trying to get a lot of feedback on greenways and trails in Olathe. Folks are excited about that. Ways that people can get involved in their own neighborhoods. Join our advocacy mailing list, and we will make sure that you get that information straight away. Also, we'd love to hear from you. So if you have ideas about how we can help you and help your neighbors stay connected and informed about policy, advocacy, and planning issues, send us an email, drop it in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. As Michael said, advocacy is a team sport, right? Did I get that right? Advocacy is a team sport. Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We appreciate you guys being here with us and sharing your ideas, your questions, and hearing about our policy goals and ambitions for 2022. Thank you for joining us for walking through the policy platform, and have a good night.
Thanks, everyone.